They learned to ride before they could even properly walk. Their young hands grasped a bow and arrow before they fully understood their first sentences, before they even knew what many words meant. This was not a forgotten legend from ancient times whispered in dusty scrolls. It was a chilling, true method of warfare, a brutal system designed for ultimate victory. This was the Mongol way, a harsh and unforgiving system. It was designed to take ordinary children and transform them into living, emotionless machines of war. These warriors would eventually conquer an unbelievable 40% of the known world, forever changing the map and the course of history for everyone. Their advance seemed unstoppable, a force of nature that swept across continents, leaving only destruction in its wake. Cities fell like dominoes, and empires crumbled at their feet. The sheer speed and brutality of their conquests were unmatched, striking fear into the hearts of every kingdom. Yet this entire perfect engine of conquest, this terrifying war machine, suddenly halted. It stopped not because of a mighty army that managed to defeat them, nor some clever, unyielding defense put up by brave soldiers. It was brought to a standstill by one single man's tragic and very human personal weakness, a flaw hidden deep within himself. How did a culture manage to engineer such incredibly perfect and ruthless killers, slowly stripping away every piece of their humanity from a tender age? What was the secret weakness that brought their terrifying advance to such a sudden, unexpected end, leaving a lasting mark on the world and changing everything? What's the one hidden historical secret you've always wanted to know more about? Something history books rarely talk about? Share your deepest curiosities in the comments below. And if you have a hunger for uncovering history's most shocking truths, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video right now to join our journey into the past. Imagine the year 1241, a time when Europe was completely unaware of the terrifying storm gathering on its very borders. Its kingdom and peoples went about their lives, oblivious to the enormous threat that was about to crash upon them, ready to wipe them out. They were living in a fragile peace, a peace that was about to shatter. But then, on December 11th of that fateful year, a silent and completely unexpected miracle occurred. This single event, a twist of fate, changed everything for the unsuspecting people of Europe. It was a moment that redirected the course of history without anyone even knowing it. Genghis Khan, the incredibly powerful Mongol leader and the direct son of the legendary Genghis Khan, tragically choked to death. This was not a glorious end on a battlefield, surrounded by his enemies as a hero, but a very human and undignified death, brought on by his own vomit after drinking too much alcohol. He was alone in his tent, his immense power unable to save him from himself. His most powerful generals stood by, watching their mighty leader take his last breath, helpless to intervene. This was the man who commanded vast armies that moved with the speed of lightning, the one who brought entire empires to their knees with a word. Now, he lay helpless, taken by cheap wine in his own camp, a victim of his own indulgence. Just outside that tent, a massive army of 50,000 Mongol warriors stood ready and waiting, their horses stamping impatiently in the cold air. They were poised to unleash their brutal force on the ancient city of Vienna, preparing to crush it completely. The very survival of Europe hung by a thread, depending on the failing liver of this one powerful man. It was a moment of true dark irony that history often overlooks. A tiny, almost secret detail with enormous, far-reaching consequences. A single personal flaw, a weakness for alcohol, saved an entire continent from total destruction. It proved that even the most powerful leaders can be brought down by their own habits, no matter how strong their armies are. The world stood on the brink of complete conquest, unknowingly saved by a quiet, personal tragedy. This unseen event diverted the unstoppable tide of the Mongol Empire. Had Ögedei lived, the map of Europe might look very different today, perhaps speaking a different language. No medieval army could ever hope to match the sheer, brutal killing power of the Mongols. Their warriors were not merely soldiers in the traditional sense. They were highly efficient instruments of mass destruction. Each one was trained from birth to kill without hesitation or mercy, becoming a living weapon. Their methods were cold, calculated, and terrifyingly effective, leaving no room for human error or emotion. On average, each Mongol warrior was responsible for around 100 kills during a single campaign, a number that sounds almost impossible to believe for the armies of that era. This was not individual heroics or acts of courage. Instead, it was a systematic approach to warfare designed to overwhelm and utterly destroy every single opponent. It speaks to a level of ruthlessness and cold efficiency never before seen in the history of the world, a new way to wage war. Cities like Nishapur experienced destruction on a scale that truly shattered the human mind, leaving behind a legacy of absolute horror. Over 1.7 million people were said to have died there, their lives erased in a brutal act of conquest, their very existence wiped from the earth. The devastation was so complete, so widespread, that historians have had to invent new words to describe the horrifying ruin they left behind, struggling to capture its true scope. It was a kind of killing that was totally new to the world, a systematic extermination rather than just a battle between two armies. This wasn't just war, as people had known it for centuries, with rules and traditions. It was an industrial process of annihilation, a method of warfare centuries ahead of its time, in its cold, calculated efficiency. The Mongols did not just defeat their enemies, they completely erased them from existence. They broke their spirit, destroyed their culture, and ensured their very existence was wiped out, leaving nothing behind. This made sure that no one would ever be able to rise against them again, forever crushing any hope of rebellion or resistance. The formula for this complete annihilation was cruelly simple, yet terribly effective in its execution. When the Mongols set their sights on conquering a city, they did not simply launch at a direct attack with shouts and charges. Their strategy was far more patient, far more devastating, and deeply psychological, designed to break the enemy's will before the first arrow flew. First, they would surround the city completely, forming an unbreakable ring of steel and mounted warriors. This cut off every single escape route, trapping all the inhabitants inside, leaving them nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no way to find safety. It was a suffocating embrace of steel and mounted warriors, designed to instill immediate and overwhelming fear, pressing in on all sides. Then they would cut off the city's water supply, a slow and agonizing torture for those trapped within the walls. Thirst would begin to gnaw at the defenders, weakening their resolve day by day, hour by hour. This tactic exploited one of humanity's most basic needs, turning it into a cruel weapon against the city's population. Next, they brought in their specialized engineers, often captured from other advanced cultures like China or Persia. These skilled workers were forced to use terrifying siege machines built specifically for breaking down even the strongest city walls and defenses. These machines were marvels of destruction, tearing apart stone and wood with brutal, unstoppable force, battering the city into submission. The people, trapped inside a city, were then given a grim and terrible choice. They could surrender immediately, which meant they would become slaves and live out their days in servitude to the Mongol Empire, their freedom lost forever. Or they could resist, which meant total and absolute eradication for everyone within the city walls. No exceptions. If a city chose to resist, believing they could fight back, the Mongols would begin a cold, efficient sorting process after their victory. They separated what they considered the useful people, skilled engineers, talented craftsmen, and young women. These individuals would be spared from immediate death and put to work for the Mongol Empire, their talents exploited for new conquests. Everyone else, regardless of their age, status, or wealth, became just a number, a mere statistic in a horrifying ledger of death. Their lives held no value to the Mongol conquerors, only their bodies to be disposed of in the most efficient way possible. This dehumanization was a key part of their process, stripping away all individual worth. Killing squads were then formed, groups of warriors given specific daily quotas for how many people they had to kill. This was not a joyous act or a moment of hatred, but a grim duty, a daily requirement like any other task. Each warrior was expected to meet his number every single day without fail. If a warrior failed to meet his quota, if he showed any hesitation or mercy, he could face execution on himself. This ruthless system ensured maximum efficiency and total compliance from every soldier. It left absolutely no room for mercy, compassion, or even a moment of hesitation from the soldiers, making them instruments of pure death. The birth of these terrifying warriors began not with formal military training, but with a deeply rooted and harsh culture of survival, learned from the moment they drew their first breath. Mongol mothers often gave their children seemingly strange or lowly names, like dog or worm. This was not meant as an insult to their offspring, nor a sign of a lack of love. Instead, it was a common practice rooted in deep superstition and a desperate hope for protection in a dangerous world. The idea was to trick evil spirits and potential raiders into believing these children were unimportant, not worth bothering with. These simple, lowly names made the children seem less valuable, less noticeable to unseen dangers. This, they hoped, would make the spirits and raiders ignore them, allowing the children to survive in a harsh and incredibly dangerous world where life was cheap and quickly taken. Even the mighty Genghis Khan, the legendary founder of the Mongol Empire, was once known by a humble name, Temujin, which simply meant just iron. This humble naming practice shows that even the greatest leaders came from a world where basic survival was always the first and most important lesson. Childhood itself was not a time for carefree play and innocent exploration as it might be in other, softer cultures. There were no games, only lessons in survival. Instead, it meant learning the harsh rhythm of death before the gentle rhythm of life, understanding danger before comfort. Children had to learn very quickly how to survive extreme cold, constant hunger, and the sudden attacks from wild animals or rival nomadic tribes. To fail to learn the easy lessons meant certain and painful death. To fail meant to become a frozen corpse on the vast, unforgiving steppes, another victim of the brutal environment, lost to the snow and wind. Survival was not a luxury, it was a daily struggle, a constant test of strength and cunning from the earliest age. This forged a resilient and ruthless spirit, hardened by constant challenges. From the moment they were tiny infants, Mongol children were exposed to a life in the saddle, becoming one with their horses. They were often strapped to the backs of horses, even before they could properly walk on their own 2 feet, forced to endure the bumpy ride. This early experience forced them to develop balance through sheer terror and instinct, learning to cling on for dear life. Their young bodies learned to move as one with the horse, becoming an extension of the animal, not just a rider perched on top. This created an unbreakable bond and a mastery of horsemanship that was unmatched by any other people in the world. It was a skill ingrained into their very being, a second nature from infancy. By the tender age of 5, these children were already highly skilled archers, their small hands strong and steady. They could shoot arrows with remarkable accuracy, even while riding at a full gallop on the back of a powerful horse. This was not a game or a sport for fun. It was a necessary skill for hunting and for defense, crucial for their very survival. By the age of 7, they were hunting game with the same skill and cunning as adult wolves, tracking and bringing down prey much larger than themselves. Their survival depended on these abilities, honed through constant practice and real-world necessity in the unforgiving landscape of the steppes. Their bodies adapted incredibly well to this brutal and demanding lifestyle, becoming tough as leather. They became unbelievably strong, incredibly resilient, and capable of enduring hardships that would break most other people. What most people considered human limits became mere suggestions for a Mongol child, simply challenges to overcome. Pain itself was not something to be avoided or cried over, but simply information their bodies sent them. It was a signal, a message that their body was working hard, but it certainly did not stop them from their tasks or their duties. They learned to push through discomfort, to ignore the physical tolls, and to keep going no matter what. One of the most powerful and chilling methods of shaping these young warriors was the nurge, or great hunt. This was far more than just a hunt for food, though it did provide sustenance for the tribe. It was a massive military exercise and a profound psychological training session, all rolled into one brutal event. Up to 20,000 riders would take part in these nurges, spreading out over an enormous area of the steppe, sometimes hundreds of miles wide. They would then slowly and systematically begin to tighten the noose, driving all the animals and any unfortunate humans caught in the path into a smaller and smaller circle. The dust would rise like a storm cloud, and the ground would tremble. Children as young as 10 years old were forced to participate in these massive hunts, their faces set and serious. They had to maintain perfect formation, riding shoulder to shoulder with the adult warriors, keeping their lines unbroken. This demanded extreme discipline, focus, and physical endurance from a very young age, testing them to their limits. Their crucial job was to push the prey, which sometimes included dangerous predators like wolves and bears, into a maddening, shrinking circle. There was absolutely no escaping this duty, no chance to rest or fall back, no room for error. They were an essential part of the living wall, each one a critical piece of the whole. If a child broke formation, or if they allowed even a single animal to escape the tightening circle, they would face severe punishment. This strict discipline ensured perfect coordination, absolute obedience, and ruthless efficiency, which meant survival for the entire group, no matter the cost to any individual. Inside the closing circle of the nurge, the trapped animals would go completely insane from fear and desperation, their eyes wide with terror. Larger predators, like powerful wolves and mighty bears, would lash out violently in a last, desperate attempt to escape. The air would be filled with the sounds of chaos and terror, roars, snarls, and the thundering hooves of frightened animals. Designated riders, often the most skilled and experienced warriors, would enter first into this dangerous fray, their arrows flying true. They would kill these larger, more dangerous animals with surgical precision, protecting the rest of the group from harm. It was a display of calculated bravery and expert horsemanship, a dance of death on the open plains. Then came the systematic sorting of the harvested resources: deer, rabbits, various furs, pelts, and meat. Everything was carefully categorized and collected, nothing left behind. Nothing was wasted. Every part of every animal served a purpose, reinforcing the value of efficiency and conservation. The children watched and participated in this entire process, from the initial chase to the final butchering of the animals. They learned to read wealth and survival in the piles of corpses, seeing how their effort translated into sustenance. They practiced arithmetic, not with numbers on a page, but with heartbeats taken and lives ended, a brutal form of counting. This grueling experience taught them a profound and brutal lesson. Life was a resource, to be taken and managed efficiently, just like any other supply. It removed any sentimentality or emotional connection to the act of killing, turning it into a cold, necessary task. The Nurj was a brutal classroom where life and death were everyday lessons, stripping away youthful innocence, leaving only hard practicality. Speed was not just an advantage for the Mongol army, it was a devastating weapon in itself, used to terrify and overwhelm their enemies. Mongol armies could cover truly incredible distances, often traveling 60 miles a day, or even more, across rough terrain. This was an astounding feat of endurance and logistics, unmatched by any other army of the time. In stark comparison, the European armies of the time struggled significantly to cover even 15 miles in the same period, often bogged down by heavy armor, slow supply lines, and marching infantry. This massive difference in speed allowed the Mongols to appear as if from nowhere, striking before anyone was ready, before any defenses could be properly organized. Each Mongol warrior was a master horseman and would lead multiple horses into battle, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 fresh mounts. They were so incredibly skilled that they could switch horses mid-gallop, leaping from one animal to another without breaking their stride or slowing their terrifying advance. This constant movement allowed them to keep their forces fresh, preventing fatigue and maintaining relentless pressure, unlike their exhausted enemies who were often on foot. Their communication system was equally astonishing and incredibly advanced for its time. A message could travel an incredible 2,000 miles in just 3 days, thanks to a sophisticated network of relay stations called YAM and incredibly fast, dedicated riders. These riders would carry messages day and night, changing horses at each station without wasting a single precious moment. This meant that urgent commands, vital intelligence, and critical information could be moved across their vast empire at truly incredible speeds, giving them an enormous strategic advantage over their slow and lumbering opponents. They always knew what was happening, far faster than anyone else, making them always one step ahead. The psychological impact of this astonishing speed was immense and devastating on their enemies. Enemies would hear distant rumors of Mongol armies far, far away, sometimes weeks or even months before. Then suddenly, those armies would appear on their doorstep just days later, seemingly out of thin air, like a nightmare made real. This shattered enemy plans even before battles had a chance to begin, creating an immediate sense of chaos and panic among the defenders. It fostered a feeling of utter helplessness and terror, making their opponents feel as if they were fighting unstoppable ghosts rather than flesh and blood warriors, leaving them without hope. Genghis Khan, the strategic genius behind the empire, understood deeply that knowledge was power, especially technological knowledge. He collected skilled engineers the way other kings collected gold or precious jewels, recognizing their true value. These weren't just any engineers, they were the very best from every conquered land he encountered, their skills essential to his conquest. Chinese siege experts, brilliant Persian mathematicians, and skilled Korean metalworkers were all forcibly brought into the Mongol service, their lives and families threatened. They were then made to betray their own civilizations, their loyalty coerced through fear and threats to their families back home. Under immense pressure, these brilliant minds were forced to create new and even more deadly weapons for their Mongol masters. This terrifying innovation meant that any fortifications that had success fully stopped Mongol armies in the spring, perhaps with stout walls and clever defenses, would often fall easily to brand new, terrible weapons by autumn. These new machines of war were developed entirely thanks to the coerced genius of the captured engineers, weaponizing their own knowledge against them. It was a truly terrifying form of technological warfare, where innovation was weaponized against its own creators. The Mongols didn't need to invent everything themselves. They simply took the best minds from their enemies and turned their strengths against them, creating an unstoppable and rapidly evolving technological advantage on every battlefield. Later conquerors, deeply influenced by the brutal and effective Mongol methods, continued this dark tradition of terror. One such fearsome figure was Tamerlane, also known as Tamerlane, who ravaged vast parts of Asia centuries later, leaving a trail of death and destruction. He built gruesome pyramids of skulls as horrifying monuments to his countless conquests, a chilling warning to all. From the city of Isfahan alone, he gathered an astonishing 55,000 skulls, a number that chills the blood and is almost impossible to imagine. These weren't just random, haphazard piles of bones thrown together without thought or care. Each skull was carefully and deliberately placed, with every jaw opened at the exact same horrifying angle, staring out silently. They were even mortared together with human ash, a truly macabre and sickening detail that speaks to the depth of his cruelty and his desire to instill absolute fear. These pyramids of skulls were not merely trophies of war, meant to celebrate a victory after the fighting. They were sophisticated transmission systems, broadcasting terror across generations and vast distances meant to last for centuries. They sent a clear, chilling, and unforgettable message to anyone who dared to oppose them. Resistance was utterly futile, and the consequences were beyond imagination. The sight of these towering, gruesome pyramids instilled a deep, paralyzing fear that lasted long after the armies had moved on, breaking the will of future enemies before a single arrow was ever fired. Beyond their physical might and technological advantage, the Mongols also created an incredible and far-reaching intelligence web. Long before their thunderous armies ever arrived at a city's gates, Mongol spies would already have infiltrated enemy cities, blending in seamlessly with the local population, their true purpose hidden. They posed as unassuming merchants, quiet traders, or even desperate refugees seeking shelter from conflicts. But beneath their humble disguises, they observed everything with sharp, hidden eyes, gathering vital information that would later be used for conquest. They meticulously counted the wells, noting every single water source and its capacity, knowing how vital it would be during a long siege. They assessed the grain stores, understanding precisely how long a city could last under siege before hunger would force its surrender. They counted the blacksmiths to gauge a city's ability to repair weapons and arm its defenders. They even looked for weak points in city walls and hidden pathways, mapping every single vulnerability for the coming assault. While European kingdoms remained mostly blind to the creeping, unseen threat that was gathering on their borders, the Mongols were already mapping their cities with incredible detail. They were evaluating their leaders, understanding their personal weaknesses and strengths, and meticulously planning their destruction with cold precision. This hidden network of spies and informants gave them an unmatched strategic advantage, allowing them to strike with surgical precision. It meant that by the time the mighty Mongol army finally appeared, they already knew everything they needed to know about their target, making their attack almost guaranteed to succeed. They knew exactly where to strike, where to exploit vulnerabilities, and how to best break the spirit of the defenders, often without even fighting a full battle. It was psychological warfare and strategic planning combined, centuries ahead of its time, giving them an almost unfair advantage in every conflict they faced. At the devastating Battle of Mohi in 1241, an army of 45,000 Hungarians was utterly slaughtered by the Mongols, a brutal testament to their efficiency. The Hungarian forces, though brave, were completely unprepared for the sheer speed, discipline, and ruthless tactics of the Mongol war machine. This battle highlighted the terrifying precision and ruthlessness of the Mongol war machine, leaving no survivors and no hope for mercy. There was no distinction in their killing, no mercy shown for status or wealth. Everyone was treated the same in death. Nobles and peasants died with equal speed and equal ruthlessness, their lives extinguished indiscriminately without a second thought. This was what some historians called the democracy of death, where all were equal in their final moments. Birthright, wealth, or social status meant absolutely nothing to the Mongols. Everyone was equally vulnerable to their systematic and methodical killing, reduced to mere bodies, mere obstacles to conquest. Subayutai, the brilliant Mongol general and master strategist, would review the casualties not with joy or anger, not with emotion at all. Instead, he looked at them analytically, with the cold detachment of a scientist reviewing data. He studied the numbers, the methods used, and the outcomes. His only goal was to understand how to improve the efficiency of their killing, how to make it even more perfect, more devastating in the next battle. For these men, a person's birth or position meant nothing in the face of their military goals. They measured only systematic death, viewing it as a craft to be perfected, a skill to be honed with every battle. The human element was completely removed, replaced by cold calculation and the pursuit of ultimate efficiency. The cost of this horrifying perfection was immense, both for the conquered people who lost their lives and for the conquerors themselves whose souls were scarred. Mongol warriors learned that ending a life required no personal hatred or anger, no strong feelings at all. It was simply a mechanical function, a necessary part of their brutal duty, no different from saddling a horse or sharpening an arrow. This efficiency, while winning countless battles and conquering vast lands, utterly destroyed their inner peace. They were taught to remove all emotion, to become perfect instruments of war, but the human soul could not be entirely suppressed forever. The horrifying memories lingered, festering deep inside them, causing immense pain. Many warriors struggled greatly with the horrifying memories of what they had done and what they had witnessed, the screams and the bloodshed. They often drank themselves into unconsciousness, trying desperately to drown out the horrifying images and sounds that haunted their minds, seeking a temporary escape from their inner torment. The alcohol offered a fleeting moment of peace from the immense psychological burden they carried, a dark coping mechanism for their broken spirits. They had been engineered to remove emotions from themselves, to become perfect, ruthless instruments of war without feelings. But in doing so, they had tragically traded their souls for efficiency, losing a piece of themselves forever. The emptiness and pain often caught up with them, even after the fighting was done and the campaigns were over, and the battles won. They had won the world, had conquered vast empires, but they had utterly lost their own inner peace, paying a terrible personal price for their conquests that no gold could ever buy back. Genghis Khan, the direct heir to the mighty Genghis Khan, tragically embodied this profound paradox. He was a man of immense power, leading the most disciplined and effective army in all of history, a true force to be reckoned with by any enemy. His body was trained for incredible endurance, capable of surviving the harshest conditions known to man, enduring extreme cold and hunger. Yet in the end, his liver utterly surrendered to the relentless assault of alcohol, a self-inflicted poison he consumed freely. His personal vice, a simple and very human weakness, tragically outranked the perfect discipline of his mighty army, proving more powerful than any enemy. The men who carried death as a craft, who had perfected the art of systematic killing, stood utterly helpless before this ordinary, self-inflicted vice of their leader. It was an astonishing and ironic weakness at the very top of their seemingly unstoppable empire, a tiny crack in an otherwise impenetrable fortress of power. This single personal flaw, this addiction to drink, brought their terrifying advance into Europe to a sudden and completely unexpected halt, changing everything overnight. It showed that even the most perfect and well-oiled machine can break down from a small internal error, a single point of failure at its core. The great conqueror, the mighty Khan, was conquered not by an enemy army or a clever trap, but by his own devastating addiction, a silent killer within his own body. The urgent order to retreat reached Batu Khan, Ogedei's nephew, who was then leading the Mongol forces at Vienna, ready to strike. The news of Ogedei Khan's death demanded that all Mongol leaders, regardless of where they were fighting in the world, immediately return to their homeland. They had to elect a new great Khan to lead the empire, a process that required all royal family members to be present. The vast war machine that had perfected conquest, that had moved with such ruthless purpose across continents, pivoted in mere hours, its direction completely changed. The enormous army, poised to devour Europe and wipe out its nations, turned and began its long, arduous journey back to Mongolia, leaving its conquests unfinished, its mission abandoned. Europe exhaled, unknowingly, breathing a collective sigh of relief that it never realized it needed to take. It had been holding its breath for months, years even, without ever fully realizing how incredibly close it had come to total and absolute destruction, to being completely wiped off the map. A single, failing liver had, in a twisted and dark turn of fate, outranked 1,000,000 sharpened blades and countless warriors. It saved an entire continent from being completely swallowed by the terrifying, relentless Mongol tide, giving it a chance to survive and rebuild itself. It's a powerful reminder of how seemingly small human flaws can have the largest historical consequences, changing the destiny of nations and redirecting the entire course of human history. Centuries later, the shadowed legacy of this brutal method still exists, echoing through time. Today, an astonishing 16 million men across Asia trace their Y chromosomes directly to Genghis Khan himself, a testament to his incredible power and influence, his genetic legacy. This means they are direct descendants of that one-step warlord, a silent, living echo of his powerful and terrifying legacy that continues to this day. The lineage kept marching forward, not with the sound of war drums or the clash of swords, but through the quiet marking of countless birthdays and generations. The heavy silence that came after the Mongol Wars still holds its own profound weight, a chilling reminder of the past and the terrible price of conquest. It is a stark reminder that the true price of crafting perfect killers shows up in unexpected places, long after the spears have been put away and the battles are over. The human cost, both for the conquered and for the conquerors, stretches through time, forever woven into the very fabric of history. This was not just a method of war, it was a weapon that twisted men into machines, forever altering their souls and leaving a lasting mark on the world. If this story shocked you and made you see history in a new light, then help us reach 1,000 subscribers by subscribing right now. And tell me in the comments below which other empire's dark secrets or hidden truths you want us to uncover next.